Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 5th PEI Open House on leveraging technology in program delivery and scaling up of NGO digital innovations. I'm going to wait for about 30 seconds or more, just while we let people into the room. So for those of you joining the room, good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are across the world. We'll start just in about 30 seconds or so. Great, so while people are joining us, welcome. My name is Colin Andrews. I'm the program manager for the Partnership for Economic Inclusion. Before we get stuck into the content for today's event, let me go through a few important housekeeping issues. Quite importantly, today's event features simultaneous translation in Arabic, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. You can find the translation by looking at the globe icon at the end of your screen, and please select your preferred language. We will have a presentation in Spanish today, so if you need interpretation for that and you are an English speaker, now is a good time just to select the English speaking channel so you don't lose yourself during the presentation itself. For any information on this event, we will share all of the presentations. We will share bio information about the participants and contact details on our Twitter account. So please feel free to go to Twitter, where I understand some folks are already live tweeting this event today. And you can also see previous open house events and previous information from other sessions on that account as well. We have to give a little plug for our newsletter and information on PEI, so feel free to scan the QR code which is on the screen if you want to receive further information on PEI as well. While we're waiting for people just to join the room, a further plug that the next PEI Open House is in the middle of April, I believe April 16th, and that will focus on evidence to scale with some presentation of information from Senegal and Zambia as well as Niger. So with that introduction, thank you. We are very excited about today's presentation. At the PEI, one of the big promises around our work is really to leverage expertise and knowledge from a very wide community, and we're really doing that just today. Very fortunate with a stellar panel of guests from Village Enterprise, Fundación Capital, and Trickle, organizations which represent over 100 years of operational experience when combined on the ground. And this is the exact type of information that we really want to showcase here at PEI. So looking forward to that conversation. I will introduce the panelists as we go along today. And we are also fortunate to be joined by Aude de Montesquieu, as well as Winnie Masiaji. We've been practicing how to pronounce your name, Winnie, from the Africa Safety Nets Community of Practice, who will be our discussants today to take a look at how some of these issues can be scaled. Let me say a couple of words on the objective of this event, and then let's get straight into the presentations. So the State of Economic Inclusion Report 2021 was an important report, and this really highlighted some of the importance and opportunities around technology and program implementation. So more than 50% of the programs that were surveyed in this report used some form of digital innovation for beneficiary enrollment, monitoring, as well as program management and outreach. 15% of the surveys of the programs surveyed also used technology to deliver payments and grants. And of course, this is a really hot topic with COVID-19, bringing a new sense of urgency into how new technologies have been adopted during the crisis, or how existing technologies have come to the fore and have been increasingly relied upon. So this is a big focus of today's event, really to try to understand how we're using technology directly for the delivery of economic inclusion programs and so forth. Now, of course, one of the most promising, encouraging advancements is the progress in digital payments worldwide. Recent estimates from the World Bank showed that the bank is supporting at least 120 social assistance cash transfer programs, 70% of which are delivering payments digitally. And out of 580 million beneficiaries currently covered by cash transfers, 90% are paid digitally on average. We make this point not to focus necessarily on cash transfers today and the delivery of digital cash transfers and digital payments. This is a massive opportunity. What we want to do in today's workshop and today's seminar is to take a little bit deeper to understand if this excitement and if this innovation can be carried over into the delivery of economic inclusions, graduation programs, safety net plus programs as well. So the presentations that you see today will really focus on the use of technology for improved coaching and training, as well as beneficiary case management. Many of our speakers today will put a big focus on considering how these digital innovations empower by improving learning, shifting aspirations and behavioral change, especially for women. And then some of the presentations and the discussion to follow will then look at the barriers and opportunities for scale up. So we have a number of really impressive programs implemented at a reasonable scale. But the question is, what is the opportunity to scale these programs up, embedding more firmly within government operations? So what does this mean from the perspective of core infrastructure, institutional aspects, and dealing with beneficiary groups where there may be issues of access as well as financial literacy? And we hope to touch on implications of COVID-19 for scale and adoption. So with that introduction, please let me remind you to feel free to use the chat box. That chat box is your friend today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those questions. And as facilitator for the event, I'll try to keep the panelists on the spot and have them really try to address as many questions as possible that they can. We're going to start off the presentation today with Celeste Brubaker. Celeste Brubaker is from Village Enterprise. And Celeste, I was on your website. So Village Enterprise are in the news a lot for some really creative impact evaluation work and a development impact bond that they've recently launched. We'll hear a little bit about that. But you are an NGO focused in the Africa region. And what I found interesting on your website was the Village Enterprise over the last 30 years or so, you can correct me, have trained 58,000 business enterprises and 200, have set up 58,000 businesses, Celeste, you must correct me, and trained 200,000 first-time entrepreneurs. So it seems you really are in this business and have a lot to share on your entrepreneurship work. So let's pass over to you.
Thank you, Colin. Yeah, indeed, we've trained since our inception over 250,000 entrepreneurs and impacted the lives of over 1 million people through our work. So Village Enterprise's mission is to end extreme poverty in rural Africa. We do this by equipping first-time entrepreneurs with the skills and resources needed to start group-based micro-enterprises. In 2017, Village Enterprise entered into a contract that catalyzed the creation and effective use of our current adaptive management system. This was an outcomes-based contract and was meant to support the scale-up of our programming in Kenya and Uganda at the time. The novelty of this contract was that all payment from donors was tied to a successful achievement of poverty outcomes. In this case, successfully increasing the income of participant households is verified through an external randomized control trial. At that time, we had monitoring and evaluation systems, but evaluation took disproportionate focus, and we weren't yet harnessing the true power of data for management. To help staff across all levels of the organization manage for success, we created data-driven adaptive management systems. The ultimate goal of the work was to ensure we were creating the impact needed for the project to be successful. We expected to achieve that by improving the timeliness of data sharing data with staff across all levels of the organization, even our frontline business mentors, and ensuring that data we did share was relevant and shared in formats that could easily be interpreted by users. Determining what data to prioritize in our system was a months-long journey involving discussions with stakeholders across the organization. We identified in our theory of change the critical instances where managers and staff most needed insights. We then developed indicators and reporting formats that made sense to staff and updated our tools and data collection and management policies. All of our data is collected virtually by enumerators and staff using the TerraWorks application. Staff is able to collect data while offline, and once they are able to access the internet again, they sync their data into Salesforce, which is a relational cloud-based database. We use the automation and data visualization features available in Salesforce to make insights immediately available to staff through their dashboards and through customized reports. The system features customized reporting for different roles and users at all levels of the organization. For example, our frontline staff are provided dashboards and reports detailing information specific to their caseloads to help inform their case management planning. An example of one prioritized outcome was business health. To help staff more quickly make sense of business progress, we developed rating categories for businesses: green, yellow, and red, depending on how the businesses were performing against 5 indicators. On their dashboards, business mentors are able to quickly see how many businesses are rated as red, yellow, and green after an enumerator completes a business health survey. Staff is able to click on the widget to access a report with more details on the businesses and the 5 business success indicators we track. The field associates, who are the supervisors of frontline staff, are provided information related to activities and business and savings group outcomes for all of the staff they supervise. In addition, country level management, regional management, international management, monitoring and evaluation, and innovations all have customized reports and dashboards relevant to their specific workloads. The researchers who carried out the randomized control trial of our development impact bond agreed to carry out sub-analysis to leverage the research for further learning. The most interesting learning for us about our adaptive management system from that sub-analysis was related to our business health ratings. The sub-analysis found strong positive correlation between our business ratings and our adaptive management system and household asset and income effects, where households participating in businesses with green ratings had the highest impacts, and those associated with red ratings had the lowest impacts. This was a strong indication that our system is working, and it gives us confidence that continuing to use our system for adaptive management will help us to continue driving impact. This system was designed to help ensure success as we scaled. And we believe smart systems like this are essential management tools for implementing well, especially when scaling or implementing at scale. The platform we're using could certainly support programming at scale from a technical perspective, but these same principles could also be used for building systems using tools that are right fit for other organizations. We believe the biggest challenges to creating this type of system are conceptualizing this type of system as a core component of project management and planning budget and time for designing the system according to that conceptualization, and also the change management that needs to be done well to ensure the new tools are understood and used productively. At Village Enterprise, there was a lot of capacity building that accompanied the rollout of the tools, and a lot of intentional emphasis that goes into ensuring the insights are reviewed, discussed, and acted on across all levels of the organization. We consider an enabling culture to be what can make the rollout and scaling of a technical solution successful for purpose or not. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Celeste. Interesting presentation. And we're going to move through some of these case studies and make sure that we leave a lot of time for questions and answers. But Celeste, maybe just let me throw just a couple of quick questions at you before we move on to our next speaker. The traffic light system, the green, yellow, and red, how variable is this? Does this it's like a real-time monitoring? So in practice, how often did you see this change? Did people tend to be in a yellow for like 6 months or 8 months, or was there a lot of fluidity? Do you have any information on that? And there's a wider question around how do you envision the potential replicability of all of this work at scale? We'll get on to a lot more of that conversation later, but they're just 2 quick questions to start us off.
Sure, yes. So that rating system, our businesses each receive 3 spot checks from enumerators. One is within the first 3 weeks after the group receives their grant. And so their grant is their seed funding to help them take their skills and their business plan and put it into action. And so that first survey is really meant to be an early warning sign for staff. And so then the second survey is actually, it's 4 months after that first grant is dispersed. And so it's really quite common actually in that first grant, for example, if the proportion that has been invested into the business has not met a specified level proportional to the amount of grant that was given, this business might be in the red, but it's something that the business mentors can then quickly act upon to go and help the business solve whatever challenge they might be confronting. And so then it's fairly common then to see movement to yellow or green by the time of the next spot check. And so then in terms of your second question, Colin, really this system, there's really nothing about the system itself that would be a barrier to scaling the system. Really, what we really believe from our experience is that creating this system was a necessary precondition to being able to maintain impact and even increase impact as we as an organization scaled.
Thanks so much, Celeste, and maybe we'll have time for some questions and answers and come back to some of the more specifics of the system itself before the end of the discussion today. Let me pass over to our second speaker, Jorge Coy from Trickle Up. Jorge is the regional representative in the Central American region for Trickle Up. Trickle Up, as you all know, have been an organization very active in the graduation space since the late 1960s. Jorge's presentation will cover a reflection on the use of some experimental efforts when addressing beneficiary engagement and beneficiaries' financial inclusion through digital tools. For those of you relying on interpretation, please go to the interpretation icon and select English. And Jorge, very glad to see you and looking forward to some experiences which will take us to, I believe, Guatemala, Mexico, and some Indian experience as well. Over to you. Thank you.
Bueno, buenos días. Un placer estar aquí, Colin. Gracias por la bienvenida. Buenas tardes y buenas noches en otros continentes. Pues un placer. Yo contarles que pues, la estrategia digital de Trickle Up está orientada a la construcción de redes, participación activa de grupos de trabajo, de innovación digital para la inclusión económica, también participar en este tipo de eventos que nos permite también compartir y aprender sobre algunas otras iniciativas. También buscamos establecer acuerdos con organizaciones sociales locales, regionales, para fortalecer sistemas, obtener información, desarrollar aplicaciones, también apoyar el desarrollo de otras aplicaciones y pues por supuesto otras herramientas que puedan ser útiles para la población a la cual servimos. Trickle Up también tiene una estructura organizativa que permite desarrollar todas estas iniciativas. Hay un equipo digital global que incluye la representación de diferentes unidades y también de la sede que está en Nueva York. Este equipo se centra en el desarrollo y la documentación de las estrategias emergentes digitales de Trickle Up y las iniciativas que se promueven mantienen un enfoque escalonado para la implementación, lo que quiere decir que vamos con ciertas poblaciones para comprobar si los sistemas son funcionales. También tenemos que decir que tenemos que abordar algunos cambios de paradigma que implican el pase del enfoque aislado a un enfoque más organizacional integrador. Buscamos un ecosistema digital también sostenible para nosotros, los socios y las participantes, y desarrollar alianzas para aprovechar las experiencias técnicas versus construir nuestros propios sistemas. Mejorar la capacidad organizacional a través del reclutamiento especializado y el reclutamiento general con experiencia digital. La siguiente, por favor. De esta cuenta, pues hemos desarrollado estas herramientas que ustedes ven acá. Aquí aparecen al menos cinco herramientas que estamos trabajando. Hay una sexta que voy a mencionar a continuación, pero también contarles que desde 2015 y 2017 hemos empezado el desarrollo de estas herramientas en diferentes regiones para constituir lo que hemos llamado una caja de herramientas digitales, tanto para la gestión, la entrega de programas y la construcción de capacidades de equipos técnicos y de nuestros participantes. Esta caja de herramientas digitales contiene al menos, como mencionaba, 6 herramientas. POP, que es esta que ven ustedes en pantalla, que significa Package of Practice, que fue la primera herramienta desarrollada por el equipo Trickle en India. S1E5, la segunda, aparece ahí. Es una herramienta de coaching individual y grupal, es la que ahorita está dinámica y se está moviendo el video. La tercera es Equals, que busca abordar las brechas digitales de género a través de la capacitación y habilidades digitales específicas al contexto y aumenta la alfabetización digital. Esta fue más utilizada en Uganda. DreamSafe, que es una herramienta para la gestión de grupos de ahorro desarrollada por DreamLab, la cual estamos comprobando en Guatemala y estamos listos para implementar en México. Y también Salesforce, que provee servicios de la nube para el monitoreo y evaluación para comunicar a nuestros socios los resultados, los participantes de los programas, el avance y pues por supuesto de la implementación hacia los resultados. Utilizamos StarWorks como herramienta de monitoreo y evaluación en el campo y se utiliza por Trickle desde 2017. Todas estas herramientas tienen un punto de encuentro en lo que hemos llamado nuestro entorno virtual de aprendizaje, que lo desarrollamos en Moodle, que es una herramienta útil para el proceso de capacitador para capacitadores y tomar cursos en línea por diferentes miembros del equipo y también por miembros de gobiernos locales. De las herramientas que he mencionado, Equals, S1E5, POP y DreamSafe, estas tienen algunas características en común. Son capaces de utilizar de utilizarse en modo offline, que es algo de suma importancia en los entornos en los cuales trabajamos. Han sido desarrolladas con el objetivo de crear capacidades y conocimientos en temas de gran importancia para mejorar los medios de vida de los participantes, y también estas aplicaciones cambian un poco el rol del técnico tradicional a un facilitador o guía de aprendizaje virtual. Siguiente, por favor. Como he mencionado, S1E5, desde el punto de vista de la entrega de programas, es una aplicación digital diseñada por Trickle para proporcionar a los participantes de proyectos acompañamiento y coaching constante. Tenemos en la versión 1.0 al menos 10 módulos de capacitación, entre ellos autoestima, pasando por cultivos de traspatio, planificación de actividades productivas, ideas de negocios, mercados. Y en este momento estamos en el desarrollo de una versión 2.0 que también integra temas como cambio climático, justicia de género, salud sexual reproductiva y también los sistemas de ahorro y crédito. También permite desarrollar módulos de coaching con antelación, lo que también facilita el proceso de entrega de servicios en campo. Adicionalmente, utiliza algunos recursos audiovisuales que permiten al coach hacer interactivo el proceso de coaching y otros procesos de aprendizaje durante la facilitación en campo. Por otra parte, POP, que es lo que decía Package of Practice, Es una herramienta digital desarrollada en el marco del proyecto Empowered, que brinda asesoramiento agronómico a los participantes del proyecto y los agricultores en general. Es una aplicación móvil que empodera a nuestros participantes del proyecto, voluntarios de proyectos y agentes de cambio y animadores también en el campo llamados Smart Shakis, para ayudarlos durante la implementación de los programas. Los Smart Shakis y los participantes del proyecto son los principales usuarios de las aplicaciones. Los principales objetivos de esta app son que las mujeres ultrapobres utilicen soluciones digitales para tomar decisiones informadas y también apoyar a los Smart Shakis, es decir, a los paratécnicos, en la prestación de asesoramiento y orientación sobre prácticas de subsistencia, toma de decisiones y lo relacionado al bienestar familiar. También estamos utilizando una tercera aplicación para la entrega de servicios. Esta aplicación es Equals. Esta aplicación fue utilizada inicialmente en Uganda con poblaciones de refugiados. Esta aplicación está en proceso de análisis y evaluación hasta hoy y tiene como finalidad la capacitación de los participantes a través de un dispositivo móvil que permite, a través de una serie de recursos audiovisuales guiados por un facilitador, capacitar en diferentes temas. El objetivo es abordar la brecha digital de género, pero también aprovechar las crecientes tasas de acceso a teléfonos móviles inteligentes que hay en el país. Y aumentar, por supuesto, el acceso a la asesoría técnica digital. Siguiente, por favor. En esta diapositiva presentamos algo en relación a POP y S1E5 específicamente. Ambas tienen algunas características similares, cuentan con una plataforma generadora de información y un dashboard para el análisis de avances, utilización y toma de decisiones relacionadas con proyectos, y además cuenta con una plataforma de distribución, en el caso de S1E5, Firebase, y en relación a POP, Google Play Store y App Store. DreamSaver es una plataforma digital que se utiliza para la toma de registros financieros de grupos de ahorro. La hemos utilizado ya en Guatemala en un primer tiempo y consiste en capacitar a las participantes de los grupos de ahorro ya conformados para llevar de manera digital los registros financieros del grupo y que a su vez estos datos lleguen a los dispositivos móviles de cada participante en el grupo mediante una notificación SMS que reciben cuando están desarrollando actividades de ahorro. Además, la información grupal es cargada a una plataforma, Insights, y se almacena en una base de datos de información y podrá ser compartida entre Trickle y sus socios. Se encuentra en proceso de pilotaje en Guatemala, como mencionaba, y estamos listos para iniciar en México a partir del mes de junio. Por otra parte, POP, pues es un centro de conocimientos, provee información acerca de los cultivos, el ganado, proporciona una lista disponible de las empresas que también están prestando servicios, de administración de los fondos de los negocios, recibe el participante, mensajes clave, notificaciones, enlaces importantes y también información valiosa en el caso de COVID-19 y otros muchos enlaces gubernamentales. Siguiente, por favor. Como mencionaba,
Jorge, apologies to interrupt, but we have to keep an eye on time, please. Just 1 minute or so. Thank you.
Muy bien, como mencionaba, este es nuestro entorno virtual de aprendizaje. Lo hemos desarrollado ya desde 2018 y estamos en un proceso de tener otras herramientas para integrar en este sistema. Por último, la siguiente, por favor. Quería decir que tenemos varias oportunidades. Las aplicaciones pueden ser funcionales para muchas poblaciones, para una gran cantidad de poblaciones. Por ejemplo, en este caso estamos tratando de potencializar S1E5 para idiomas mayas, para utilizarse en México y en Guatemala. Y pues para nuestro siguiente programa, que se llama Fuerte en México, vamos a utilizar DreamSafe y también S1E5 con al menos 6,000 nuevos participantes entre 280 y 300 grupos de ahorro. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Jorge. A fascinating presentation. And I think later in the session, together with Winnie and Ode and the wider panel, we would like to start hearing a little bit more how these technologies connect with the local infrastructure and also connect with government partners and government programs, where I know that there has been some progress. But Jorge, maybe just back to you. There is a question in the chat box. And the question is from Hugo Brosset, and he asks, how is the process of training social workers on the field in order to use these IT solutions? So how do you work with local social workers, local enumerators to help with the use and with the access of technology?
Muchas gracias. Sí, nosotros estamos teniendo una vinculación, diría, sincrónica y asincrónica para estos procesos, utilizando nuestro sistema virtual de aprendizaje, pero también lo hacemos de manera presencial con nuestros socios. En muchos casos también, tanto en México como en India, el proceso de capacitación implica que hagamos grupos de trabajo y que podamos desarrollar procesos de capacitación en diferentes niveles, tanto con técnicos gubernamentales, con técnicos de organizaciones locales, pero también con facilitadores de campo o paratécnicos, como mencionaba antes. Entonces, el proceso es que identificamos a quiénes van a ser los que entregan los servicios directamente en campo y sobre ellos desarrollamos un proceso intensivo de capacitación que implica los procesos desde selección e identificación de participantes hasta los procesos de desarrollo de micronegocios. Entonces, en todo este proceso tenemos un paquete de capacitación mediado pedagógicamente, tanto para técnicos como para técnicos y técnicos, que permite desarrollar de manera efectiva esa transferencia de conocimientos. Por supuesto, esto siempre que nosotros estemos en acuerdo con los tomadores de decisiones locales y ONGs locales que intervienen en todo el proceso.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jorge. Let's move on to our third case study. Our third case study presenter is Tatiana Rincon, the Vice President on Gender, Social Protection and Livelihoods at Fundación Capital. Fundación Capital are an NGO organization long established, working in 18 different countries, serving 6 million different beneficiaries, and really focused on principles around economic citizenship, economic inclusion. So we'll hear from Tatiana now. Her presentation will focus on the extent to which these digital innovations can be applied for improving learning, shifting aspirations, and behavioral change. And Tatiana, as you start your presentation, I will just alert you to a couple of questions in the chat box from Hito Chakma and Dan Norwell. And their questions are really trying to dig deep into the technology systems that support these applications, and perhaps how we can look at open access technologies as well for public programs. And I know you're joined by a colleague as well, William, and happy to hear from William later on in the conversation too. But over to you, Tatiana.
Good morning, Colleen and colleagues. Okay, now it's working. Okay. Well, it's a great pleasure to be with all of you this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are. Very briefly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you, like, when we started at Fundación Capital working with graduation programs, that was like 10 years ago. And since the very beginning, even though like at that moment we were working with very small pilots, we were thinking about the scale. And for us, one way of reaching scale was working directly with program participants with technology. And also we were so intrigued, and we were also very willing to use technology and to see how this could enhance graduation programs. So we built an application that is old right now. It's called Aptitude. It was built 10 years ago, and it was basically for training. So we were training about financial inclusion, business management, soft skills. The methodology for using these tablets was a tablet rotating methodology. So we were working with the coaches, and in some cases the coaches were rotating the tablets, and they were in that way they were delivering the content. Or sometimes we had small groups like savings groups, and they were rotating the tablets among themselves. So they were learning with our systems. I'm gonna be self-critical, and I would say this was a really nice ebook. So it's like somehow, like if I look back, I say the way we use technology was very limited. We use, for example, the tablets have a GPS for monitoring, so we knew where the coaches were, because sometimes we were very concerned about like having all these large numbers of people in the field. So how you know where they are and if they are really reaching the program participants. So we were using the back end just to track the coaches, and also to see the level of progress in terms of content delivery for the participants. So I knew, for example, that this person, Maria, she did all the content related with business management, but she didn't work on the business management still. So it was the way we use technology at that moment. And also at Fundación Capital, we were thinking a lot about how we can work with a deeper sense, how we can influence systems change. And since the very beginning, we have been working with governments, and we have been able to influence like the way they deliver the social protection systems. But we were thinking also about like how we can address the root causes of poverty and try to go beyond. So we developed a second application that is called Igualdad. And the objective of this application is to transform social norms. So it's not only about providing content on one thing or the other, but it's to see how we are able to influence behavioral change in terms of social norms and create like a better society. So this was something very, very new to us in terms of working with this transformative approach lens. And also in other programs at Fundación Capital, we were using a virtual assistant that is called a Connector. And this virtual assistant works with WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. And the idea for us was to integrate the three systems so we can have like a more robust coaching experience with program participants. So we started doing testings, and throughout this process, we were very lucky to be working with Daria Collins. Maybe some of you know her or remember her. She wrote the portfolios of the poor, and she has done a lot of interesting evaluations. And she also like wrote a very interesting technique where, and also like this was very, it was at the moment of the pandemic, she was going to conduct the evaluation, but the evaluation was going to be done also through WhatsApp. And like the data for the evaluation was collected. So we ran the pilot, we used the three applications, and we wanted to see the effect on this in terms of social norms transformation and the impact that we could have with the integration of the gender application and also like the virtual assistants, if we were able to influence social norms or not. That was the goal of this specific of this specific evaluation. We had to do the evaluation using WhatsApp again. So we had or Daryl like had a data collection systems. She used an audio transcription system, and then all this was processed with analysis of vocal indicators. That's basically the lie detectors that we see in the movies. So she was analyzing like what participants were saying about their experiences, etc. Also, they were using natural language processing systems. And at the end, we were able to get a really robust and cost-efficient evaluation that gave us a lot of insight in terms of how much we were able to switch and change social norms in terms of our work. Something that has been I mean, I really like this, the invitation, a colleague and Claudia and the colleagues from PEI, because we have been doing a lot of reflections that I would like to share and also comment with all of you. And see, if I want to be self-critical, we have been using a really nice ebooks, but what I would like to see, it's really intelligent coaching. For example, connector, like the virtual assistant, could be an opportunity to really provide the users with custom-made tips and advice, because the applications are fixed. So you have to go through certain, I mean, the applications are programmed with certain lessons, but if you need to deliver specific content or specific tips, what is really flexible is the virtual assistant. So if this, so right now, the systems are not really customized to the needs of each specific user. Like we know, for example, we have a group of people and they are in the year, in the month number 1 or 2. So we program the applications manually to provide all the information. So the people see everything very smooth, but it's a person who is doing the interoperability. So one challenge that we have right now, and something that we are working on, is to see how the 3 applications interact technologically between each other. And also, like, something that we would like to see is to identify how connector can be really a response system that is specific to each user. So connector is intelligent, but he will be more intelligent. So what I would like to see is how we can use artificial intelligence into graduation. And for that, a limitation or something that we need is to have like a really large number of users. So the systems will be able to analyze and really provide very detailed information and provide like detailed inputs for each user. So I see this as a limitation, but also as a huge opportunity in the future, because what I think is, like, right now, approximately one coach works with 70 people. But if we really have an artificial intelligence tool integrated with all the other digital systems, we would be able to have one coach with 150 or even more participants, because the technology will be a real support of the coach instead of being just an ebook. So this is something that I really think can be the real future for technology and scalability, because at that moment we will really reduce the cost of coaching within these programs, and in that way we will be able to be really scalable. I don't know if I am confusing all of you with all this, but I have help here, because I am not a tech person. I work more on gender, but I have a colleague here who will share with us a little bit more about that, and we'll talk about the questions that you mentioned, Colin. And also, and a second reflection is, okay, like we knew, like from the very beginning, like the aptitude, which I absolutely love, has been very effective. Like people are very engaged with all the characters, with the lessons. And I said, okay, we have been able to transmit good information, but are we really transforming social norms? I mean, is technology really, is really strong enough to do this? And the evaluation that Daryl conducted, she says, okay, you have been able to do, she said, okay, you are influenced social norms in certain topics. For example, in terms of the use of contraceptives, the awareness about sexual consent in marriage, the awareness of household chores division, although like people were asking us about, okay, how we can negotiate with our partners and seek more support. So we are aware that we need to do all this work together in the household, but how I can do this? How can I negotiate? I need more like negotiation advice. Also, like people became more aware of control as a form of violence. That violence is not only physical, but it has other forms and nuances. So like people became more aware of that. And also like education inequality, like toys for boys and girls, like this is something that we were able to influence, and this is something that we can really see the difference between the control group and the treatment group in Daryl's evaluation. However,
Tatiana, I need to come in on time. If you could just take a minute to wrap up. Thank you.
Okay, this is the last one. Thank you, Colleen. However, like there were some aspects where we didn't move the needle, like the treatment of children, like people, like we need to work on that. For example, things about harassment, like we were not, we were not, we need to work more on that. And also, there are some topics that like people, it seems that they already knew. So they say, okay, if you need to cut the number of units, there are certain units that are not necessarily like the necessary ones. And also like another aspect that I really think a lot, if we want to change social norms, we need to involve men. And one of my dreams is to have like a video game for men that they are the husbands or the partners of the traditional women that were in graduation programs. So to see if we can also start like shifting their attitudes towards like gaming and having like a different way of working with them, because sometimes it's very difficult for them to engage them and become partners in the programs. And last but not least, something that I would really, really like to see is how we can use data in a more robust way, because as I mentioned at the very beginning, we were using data in a very limited way, but I believe that we can use data, and especially like the data with the interactions from program participants, because the virtual assistant is a two-way communication system. So the data we gather from program participants would be able to give us lessons and ideas to provide them with better services and custom-made and tailored services. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you, Tatiana, and thanks to all the presenters. It's not so easy to present in such a short time constraint, and there is so much ground to cover. But soon we'll move into the second part of this workshop, and I would like to bring all the presenters back into that conversation to cover a lot of issues, particularly around the technology, and maybe we'll bring William into that part of the conversation in a few minutes, just to address some of those technology and open source data and interoperability, which many people seem to be concerned about. But Tatiana, before we let you go for now, there's a question from Alexandra Heinemann in the chat box, and essentially her question looks at literacy. So as we think about extremely poor population groups, vulnerable population groups, technical access, digital penetration, how did you have to adapt, particularly on the financial literacy side, for people to become familiar with instruments? And especially as you think about artificial intelligence and the use of artificial intelligence, really, how much do you think you can push this agenda with those constraints in mind?
Well, I would say that we never had, and I believe that the same happened with Celeste and with Jorge Trickle. We have never had any issue with literacy, because the applications are very, I mean, they don't have text, they are interactive, they are very easy to work with. Like the challenge sometimes is to have the devices. So that's why we were working with tablets. But nowadays, since more people are having mobile phones. Like the goal of the technology is to see how we can make this lighter and put all these in people's own devices. But in terms of literacy, like it's even good because sometimes the parents can feel a little bit stressed out, but children come and they help parents, and in that way they are also being taught about financial inclusion, about very good things. So there is a really nice spillover effect. So something that we are doing right now is that sometimes our applications can be very heavy to fit in a phone. So now we are breaking the applications in pieces, so we can upload and download things necessary, because if I have to compete with the children's photos in the phone, of course, graduation programs are going to lose. So we need to see how the technology continue being interactive, but also light, so it can fit everyone's devices. Like our goal is also to use people's devices and not to use as many tablets. We will have to use tablets at certain point, but we want to use less and less tablets. But I agree with Jorge that he says that sometimes devices can be a challenge. But literacy, I would say, is not a challenge at all, because of the way the applications are being built.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. I would ask our panelists to stay with us for the next remainder of the session, and we'll bring you back on in a few minutes. But let's switch gear shortly and open up for some wider reflection. Really happy to have the following two presenters with us today. Winnie Masiaji, who is working with the Africa Safety Nets community of practice and is well known to many of us in the call through her leadership within the government of Kenya on social protection agenda. And similarly, Aude de Montesquieu, Senior Advisor at the BRAC Institute of Governance and Development. And Aude needs no introduction to many of you, given her strong track record of work in this area with CGAP and with PEI as well. So really delighted to have you both here. Winnie and Aude, maybe a starting question to both of you. I mean, you've been listening to this discussion now for the last hour, and it would be good to get some general observations from you, particularly from your vantage points. How do you see the potential for scale in these technology innovations? What do you see as the potential or challenges for replicating or tailoring digital interventions at scale to support delivery, especially working with government partners? Winnie, we'll pass the floor to you and then turn over to Aude as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Collins, and thank you, Claudia, and the presenters. I think it was very intensive in terms of what you presented. For me, I think you were looking at more of an organization level, but I would like to go down to the community level and really try and see. I know it has been said that most of the community members have these smartphones. But for me, I think the issue of poverty for us, because the people we really target, especially with economic inclusion and the other cash transfer program, are the very, very, very poor communities. So there's always something that we have to think about, whether I can own a smartphone or eat. So some of them are extremely poor and are not able to eat. And that is what we are still grappling with. I know at the organization level, as a government, Kenya, we have really done a lot in terms of targeting using the digital technology. We've done a lot in terms of listing, payment. We are, I think, one of the top countries in terms of payment. In fact, even during the COVID, it was quite good because we were able to reach people with a mobile payment system. But when it comes to a community level, when they're using mobile phone, we even found it a problem when some of them don't have phones. You are using a neighbor's phone, and that is how you lose out on some of those things. So I know at the organization level, we are able to use a lot of these gadgets here and there. But when it comes to the community level, we need to start thinking about that. If we are going technology, if we are digitalizing this, how then we purchase these gadgets and be able to maintain? For us, again, some of the part of the countries have very poor power supply. So again, as we go digital, how I know there's issue of payment offline, online, and that is especially for the service provider. But what of the person there at the grassroots level? I know currently a lot of the areas have been penetrated with power. The Kenya has really been working a lot in terms of increasing the power supply across the country. But we must appreciate that those things are still there. Even the issue of network, access to internet and all those network is still a big problem. And I also want to say that some of the people we are targeting are the very old, and therefore illiteracy is still some. We have to consider it a bit, even as we look at the technology. How do we make sure that also those that are not literate, how do we make sure that we form peer groups or something to be able to help them support? Because I know some of them have used their grandchildren who have also misused the issue of the gadget, knowing the gadget, and have done things that are not good for the older person, like taking away the funding and all that. It's not that much, but there are a little percentage of the population that we still really need to look at as we go digital. Kenya, we are also happy that as we go do the payment, we have worked with service providers like Safaricom and some of the bank to subsidize some of the cost of the banking, because even the bank is in business. So therefore, when they're doing payment, the issue of subsidizing, that has been done. And I think for us, that has also really helped us. Of course, we also know that there are also apathy in terms of using technology. Sometimes when you use them for bigger things like training and coaching and all that, we would really like to use. In Kenya, we have used for targeting, we have used for payment, we use it a bit for case management. But when it comes to coaching, we have not done a bit. But then how do we learn lessons from the organizations that have done this and see how we are able to do it better in terms of making sure that the issue of apathy is also not there. People feel friendly with the phones. But again, the gadget, I'll still say that it's one of the biggest challenges. One other thing that I would like to mention, that the issue of upgrading the systems that we have. Currently, Kenya, we are trying to enhance our single registry to help us in terms of doing the targeting and all that. But of course, we need to see how we can frequently upgrade it, because when we are doing targeting, we were not able to validate some of the information because of the capacity of the various systems that we have. So again, we have to really put in place the cost of upgrading these systems now and then for us to be able. But I know technology is a very good thing, and the COVID showed us that we really need to go technology to be able to reach the most needy. That's what I'd like to say for now. Over to you, Collins.
Thanks. Thank you, Winnie. Maybe just as a follow-up, let's hear from Ode first, but as a follow-up, it would be interesting to hear from you from a government perspective as you've looked at these issues with coordination with service providers and different entities. What has your experience been? My impression here is that as a government representative, you may be faced with several organizations, with several technologies and several platforms, but how do you synergize that? And then how do you make connections with the private sector, especially coming from a social protection house or sometimes a gender ministry? What are the opportunities and what are the challenges there? Maybe while you think about that, let me pass over to Ode, and Ode, let's hear from you, and then we'll go back to Winnie. I'd invite others in the chat box. Please feel free to make some comments or feel free to join the conversation. Over to you, Ode.
Thanks a lot, Colin. Thanks for the opportunity. I think there's a massive potential to scale up some of these innovations we heard about. And I think that the biggest potential is just how much they could and can increase cost effectiveness of the programs. I think they can do that in two ways, both by increasing program outcomes. We heard, about Igualdad, changing gender norms. We heard about Echbenik from Trickle Up, really trying to help participants on the pathway out of extreme poverty and customizing the interactions with participants. And then where I think there's a really strong potential is also on the optimizing the program management by increasing program efficiency, enhancing staff performance. We heard from Jorge about the Moodle staff training app, but we also heard about VE's solution to strengthen the program management, adaptation, learning, rollout. So I think that those are the you know, the two big places where we can see increased cost effectiveness through these technologic innovations. I'd say there are four major challenges, since you asked about the challenges. I think the first, and this echoes some of what Winnie said and a bit of what Tatiana, or let's say I'll nuance some of what Tatiana said. But the first one for me is accessibility and costs. You know, the different regions we heard about on this presentation are not equal in terms of infrastructure, in terms of a lot of these rely on a minimum of public or private sector infrastructure, such as digital payments that Winnie was talking about, mobile connectivity, internet connectivity, unique ID systems, access to internet, etc. And here we know different regions are very unequal. The second is that women are much less equal than, you know, are much to a disadvantage than men on a lot of these things, including on phone ownership, access to internet, you know, digital identification, and a lot of the prerequisites that are needed to make use of some of these digital innovations. The last thing I want to say is that the cost of some of these innovations is still super high beyond the actual ownership of a phone, which is still prohibitive, Tatiana. That's why I want to nuance some of the things you said. In Latin America, you know, there's large access to cell phone and even smartphone, but in other parts of the world, much less. So the actual cost of the device is still super high. And then there's also the cost of the technology solution, which is still very high in many cases. And so we need to be more creative in terms of finding channels and tools that can reduce costs, including open access systems, being in a position to open up choices, increase competition, and bring down the costs, a bit like we're seeing in the healthcare sector. The second challenge beyond accessibility and cost is a bit of what Alessandra just pointed to in the chat, but you know, it's the fact that women have lower digital and financial capabilities, and that's proven. It's recorded in the Findex, the latest Findex. And as Winnie said, I like the term women might be amongst those who are less friendly with phones. You know, she was talking about youth being more friendly with phones, but women and older people might be less friendly with phones. And so we really have to see how we can increase basic financial and digital literacy and numeracy, and we need to find innovations that are designed with this particular client segment in mind. And the last thing I want to say, well, the before last is that we need to pay greater considerations about, are these digital innovations safe for the poorest? You know, there's a whole question of making adequate use of data and making sure that we're protecting the consumer. CGAP is doing a lot of work on responsible data and consumer protection in this space. But we know that, you know, any error here will be really detrimental in the trust that poor people have of these products. And recent research by Daryl Collins, who Tatiana mentioned, the great author of Portfolio for the Poor, is really showing that the trust question is very gender differentiated, and that women have much bigger fear and resistance to digital, the use of their data and their privacy questions. And finally, the last thing is that the massive elephant in the room is the question of integration with government systems. It's very weak across the way. There's some great examples. Winnie just referred to the payments, you know, the partnership between the Safari Bank and the government of Kenya. But, you know, in terms of digital coaching and linking up with the, you know, starting to burgeon ecosystem of apps at the front end, there's very little integration with any of the government systems across the way. And I'd be happy if someone on the call can call out other great examples, but I think that's the elephant in the room. Thanks, Colin.
Thanks so much, Aude. Let's hear from, there's a few questions coming in the chat box, and I will get to those shortly. But Winnie, let's come back to you for really a great segue Ode, on integration within the government systems and any further perspective that you might have on that. And I'll open up that question to all of our speakers as well to follow up there.
Thank you, Collins, once more. I think for us, Kenya, integration into the government system is not so bad, especially when it comes to targeting. Currently, we are developing what we are calling the where we want all the other partners who would like to target or work with the different population to be able to target to. We are trying to see how we can have a harmonized way of being able to target. And for me, I think I'm even a bit feeling that the NGO world is the one that is a bit difficult into penetration of their data system. For us, I think for the beneficiary, apart from the areas that are not supposed to be a bit private or a bit of the public area, those ones are kept. But I want to say for us, we are already building a system that we are trying to work with all the partners who would like to get information or data from those particular systems. So long as we are using the data sharing protocols and signing those things, it's okay with that. So again, I want to say that integration is not so bad. And then I want to say also that currently Kenya is very open. We are currently working actually with the VE, Village Enterprise Fund, and BOMA, NGOs we are working with in terms of in the economic inclusion program, and in terms of sharing information and knowledge. And as we are learning a lot from them, I think in terms of coaching and training, we have not used the digital platform yet, but I think it will be something that we would like to look if we can work on it. But again, looking at the poverty level for us, I think the adaptation might be very slow in terms of people being able to pick it up, because even if you wanted to pick it up, some of them are not able to afford to manage and maintain the various gadgets that are required for this, all these things. But it's a good thing that would really help us in terms of moving faster, being able to reach people faster. But of course, the infrastructure and all that is what's the problem. And then I want to say that our national policy actually it's a framework that opens way for public-private partnership. And that's how we are working with the different banks and different institutions to be able to see how we can reduce the cost of delivering social protection to the poor and the vulnerable, so that we don't push the cost towards the poor people, we can cost share between the government, because it's a very expensive affair, how we can share the cost of delivery with the various organizations, institutions that are delivering the cash transfers or any economic inclusion intervention. Again, as for graduation programs, I don't know how we are able to deliver some things like assets, unless you're going to deliver assets through cash. But if you're going to deliver assets, again, we need to think of how some of those things can be done, because I think it cannot go purely digital, but it will be a mixture of both digital and a bit of manual delivery of some of these particular things. So that's what I would like to see. But I think the government of Kenya is really working towards enhancing issues of digitalization to make sure that we are able to reach people easily, and we are in terms of targeting and then also being able to deliver the benefits that we have. We are also working on as I said, the grievance redress mechanism, but it might only go to the office at the grassroots level. We might not take it to the community level, because again, and the being able to report on those things, people fears the use of these gadgets, and that is still a really big concern for us, but we are working towards that. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Winnie. I think the government of Kenya are kind of really making important path-breaking interventions in this space, but also combined with some of the work you're doing with the wider safety nets community of practice. I'd like to bring back Tatiana, Jorge, and Celeste. If any of you have any reactions to what you've heard. And I'm hearing two interesting things. One is on the kind of private sector linkages, and Ode, I'd like to come back to you a little bit about that in a moment. But for the other speakers, this linkage between the NGO space and the government systems and the integration. We know from the SEI report actually that this linkage is actually quite strong. In many of these multifaceted programs, we're seeing an increasing trend towards integration. But from the technology point of view, particularly from training and coaching, how does this look? Tatiana, I think, well, everybody's moving on my screen. I think, Tatiana, you had your hand up, so I'm going to give you the floor.
Yes, no, really great issues that were raised by Odd, Winnie, and the colleagues, and in the chats. Just very quickly, I took notes and I have some initial reactions. I totally agree with you, Odd, in terms of ethics and how we have to think about ethics in this space. And like, for example, now we have a new data strategy, and one of the pillars is protection, user protection and ethics. And there are like codes, and there are a lot of opportunities to, I mean, as we advance with the technology, we have to always keep in mind we are working for these people. Technology can be used to understand people better, serve them better, but we also need to be very careful. And this is like a key consideration in our work. In terms, like in Fundación Capital, we mainly work in Latin America. We have had some experiences in Africa with the graduation program. And I agree, like the challenge, like the challenge we had in Latin America 10 years ago was it was related with ownership of the devices and how there is a gender gap in terms of ownership. Right now, there has been a rapid adoption, so the context is very different. But we were able to test a few years ago in Tanzania the use of devices, and it was fantastic. I would say, I mean, don't be afraid, do it, use it. You have something that I really love about Africa, and it's something that we lack in our continent, and it's like the social cohesion. So I believe that within the community groups, tablets can be used, rotated, used. And if we don't do that, my personal concern is that we are widening the digital gap with women, even though it's difficult, even though they may be scared at the very beginning. Like in our experience in Latin America, in Colombia, where I came from, I mean, there are so many challenges in terms of security, etc. We have never, any tablet was stolen, was broken, like communities are super responsible, they can use it. So I would say, we have to even go larger. I have a colleague here that I don't know if it's, I saw him entering at one moment, is Rodrigo Enieto. He's running a really large program in Mozambique, and he's using technology, so he can maybe share a little bit more about the experience. But based on the experience that we had in Tanzania, I believe that in Africa there is a huge potential, and we have to think creatively in terms of how we can put these devices in women's hands. And also, I would say that the challenge with interoperability with government's systems and databases is that all of them are very different. Some of them are not very updated. So there is this technological divergence between the technologies that make that almost impossible. Like, I am ashamed of saying, okay, our systems are not even interoperable within Fundación Capital, and now try to connect them outside of the government. It's even worse because each government is different. They have different systems. Their M&E systems don't work quite well. With the support from COIMPACT, we are working very strongly with the government of Paraguay in enhancing their monitoring systems. So that might be one experience, but again, that's one experience. But we have like a really large question and challenge when we are talking like when we are thinking about a broader sense. And I agree with Odd. I believe that the cost of the technology for me sometimes is very discouraging, because the process of doing all this is expensive, and I believe the cost has not been able to be reduced as much as we want, because we still need the scale. But my dream is that this is something that can be done in the future. I was really very interested. I mean, at the very beginning, I hated virtual assistants and chatbots, and they said they are very silly, and they don't. I guess all of us, we have had really bad experiences. But I remember an article that I read like a month ago from the New York Times about General Motors and how they invest so much money. And last year they were able to save $1 million. And now, like the service they have, their call center is now focused on the very, very rare specific cases. And now, like, there is a point where technology really breaks the cost. But I don't know how much do we have to invest until we really reach that point. But that's a question behind my mind all the time, and I certainly agree with you, Odd.
Thank you, Tatiana. Let me bring in Celeste and Jorge, and then come back to Ode in a moment. I'm just aware of time, and we have just 10 minutes to wrap up this whole seminar. We could talk for a much longer space of time. I do want to acknowledge a question from Barbara Jackson from Trickle around the imperatives of evaluating in this space and what we can link to evaluation, which I think is a nice segue to Celeste. So let me pass over to you.
Sure. Could I actually maybe ask Barbara to deliver the question again? I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
Sure. So Barbara's question, I'm just reading from the chat box here. From the Trickle Up side, we would be very interested to learn more about evaluating the effectiveness impact of training via digital in terms of comparison with non-digital of one-on-one or group coaching, as so far much of it seems a combination of both. You can also come back to that in the chat box if you prefer.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So this is, I wonder if, let me give a little bit of context, because this is not what I discussed in my presentation, but something else that Village Enterprise has been working on is designing digital programming that we can deliver to the participants. And so, so far where we've come in our journey is developing little short videos that can be used to augment the training, and also exploring how we can use phones for mentoring. And so, so far in our journey is we start with a human-centered design process where we really try to develop solutions that make sense for the context and for the problem that needs to be solved. And then we think about what are all of the assumptions that we need to validate in order for this to be a successful solution. And then we go into a period of lean testing. And so the lean tests that happen a little bit later in this sort of learning cycle are where we're looking more at the effectiveness or the impact of these interventions. And so typically for us at the pilot stage, that's like a lean test, like an A/B lean test. So as we were working on our digital training, sort of like questions along the way might have been questions around operational efficiency, satisfaction, and then at the very end, looking at actual comparing training comprehension and training retention between groups that received that additional augmented digital training and those that did not. Does that answer the question?
I think it does, and maybe it's also a useful plug. Maybe if you would like to share some of your recent evaluative work in the chat box, I think many people would like to hear it. Jorge, just very briefly, I want to bring the conversation back to the integration with government systems. And Celeste, maybe you might like to take a minute after that just to refer some closing words. How are these programs integrating with the government systems, and how do you see these opportunities and challenges? Over to you.
Muchas gracias. Yo creo que el aspecto más importante a considerar, como lo ha mencionado Tatiana, es el aspecto financiero, ¿no? Cómo los gobiernos pueden invertir o quieren invertir con voluntad en términos de adoptar la tecnología. Y creo que es ahí donde tenemos que trabajar con los acuerdos con ellos y establecer específicamente qué es lo que buscaríamos con que ellos adopten esta tecnología. Por supuesto, quizá no tengan la capacidad o no tengan el interés de adoptar todas las tecnologías, pero las que sean más útiles para ellos. Por eso hablamos de una caja de herramientas, ¿no? Tener varias opciones para presentar con los diferentes gobiernos y en los diferentes contextos. Nosotros trabajamos y hemos trabajado antes en diferentes niveles, con gobiernos estatales, con gobiernos federales, con gobiernos locales. Y en muchas ocasiones ese es el vínculo más importante. Cómo el gobierno local podría llegar con esta tecnología para proveer servicios a la comunidad, considerando también que muchos de los participantes con los que trabajamos, como decía Winnie, no tienen teléfonos inteligentes. A veces ni tienen teléfonos en las comunidades. A veces es un poco difícil conseguir un teléfono inteligente en un grupo de ahorros. Y eso realmente es un aspecto que debemos de considerar. ¿Cómo deberíamos llevar estas opciones de tecnología hacia la comunidad. Por eso nosotros hemos trabajado con los Smart Shakis en India, hemos trabajado con los facilitadores comunitarios y los paratécnicos en diferentes países. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. So we're heading into the last 5 minutes of discussion. We will have a survey coming up on the screen, and we would hope that you can complete the survey before you go. But I'd like to go back to each panel member with a question just for 1 minute of response. Ode, I'd like to come back to you because you're doing interesting work on with sp.org on an economic inclusion working group. It might be useful to hear a little bit about that, but also the degree to which private sector engagement, how strong the private sector engagement is in this space, and opportunities around that, particularly as we're looking at some of these different technologies. Over to you.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity, Colin. Yes, with support from a philanthropic donor who supports a lot of the innovations that are actually featured today, not all, but several of them and more. I facilitate a working group of practitioners, academics, funders looking to learn and exchange around digital innovations for economic inclusion, digital innovations that can help economic inclusion programs scale. I'll just pop in the chat box here the link if you want to join that group. Please do so. And in this role, I constantly am looking for digital innovations and organizing monthly demos of products that are being used by some economic inclusion practitioners in this space, or that could be used. And just to give you some examples, I think there's a flurry of things happening, and it's really, there's a lot going on. And broadly, to kind of give you an oversight, I think that there's quite a bit happening on the kind of on the participant side, quite a lot happening around the money management or financial literacy support for low literacy users. We have a lot of apps that are being built in with behavioral insights built in. We heard about Trickle Up and VE using DreamSave. There's Shomoka that's designed and become spun off as a private sector like a venture by CARE, an app that helps people manage their savings. You see a lot of these innovations at the client side also using human-centered design to come up with the product, and then paying a lot of attention to the UI UX for this low literacy group. I'm thinking of ForShare Cash Calculator that BOMA is using and others. Then we're seeing some e-coaching apps. We heard from Tatiana about Connector's two-way interaction system and the kind of virtual assistants, but there are also some lower tech solutions like the Amplio Talking Book, which is basically a preloaded device that is distributed by CARE in rural communities, for example, in East Africa and Ethiopia, where people can just listen and record some of their some of their thoughts on some coaching content. And then there are some really high-tech innovations also on the mental health side. For example, the last demo featured a group called Strong Minds that's using SMS and chatbots to deliver community-based therapy to rural women in Africa. And it's being piloted right now by BRAC in Uganda for some of the adolescent girls' livelihood programs. And then on the kind of optimizing management and learning, we're seeing a lot of efforts around some of these monitoring and evaluation tools, building in predictive analytics to inform the coaching. We heard about VE's efforts and the traffic light system. We know about Impact Atlas. There's ComCare by Dimagi, which UPGI BRAC's Ultra-Poor Graduation Initiative is piloting in the Philippines. All these programs in different different ways, using predictive analytics to provide nudges to coaches, and analysis through dashboards of different trajectories that participants have. Finally, there are some efforts which are still, quite tentative, but to link some of the micro level household data gathered by economic inclusion programs with third-party big data, like FarmStack, for example, is providing a solution to link some of the household level data with meteorological data in India. And the last thing I want to say is we're seeing some innovations around the efforts to link participant households to markets. So we know that Connector is trying to do that in Mozambique through a government job platform, but there are also other efforts. For example, Skill App, used by HIAS in Ecuador, is using artificial intelligence to create CVs for people in the informal sector and then help them connect to job platforms. So there's a lot of innovation happening. Just two challenges
sorry, can you put the challenges into our chat box? I really hate
Okay, cool. Perfect, I will.
I want to give a couple of closing words to everybody. If you could just take a short moment. Winnie, any quick final reflections from you? And then to our participants, just one question. If you had to do something differently, having been in this space for so long, what one thing would you have done differently? Winnie, just any closing thoughts? Over to you. In general.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Collins. I think generally for me, I think going digital is very good. It makes work easier, even in terms of economic inclusion, but we need to know or start thinking of how do we fund the infrastructural development to be able to accommodate this. So that is one of the greatest things. How do we fund the infrastructure? And then how do we deal with issues of apathy and illiteracy in terms of this? So those are some of the considerations that we should make. We should look at when we are going at community level. At organization level, there's no problem. At the community level, we must see how we are going to deal with some of the challenges that we anticipate. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me go to Jorge, Celeste, and Tatiana. Jorge, one thing you would have done differently.
Sí, yo creo que, no sé si diferente, pero quizá lo hubiera hecho antes. Ya, es decir, empezar el desarrollo de tecnología no en 2015, sino que quizá algunas tecnologías que pudiéramos haber adoptado antes. Lo otro es que creo que lo que trataríamos de hacer es llevar de alguna manera estas aplicaciones hasta el teléfono móvil del participante. Pero ahí vemos que existe una barrera que tenemos que superar, que es la disponibilidad de teléfonos móviles inteligentes en comunidades rurales que viven en condiciones de pobreza extrema, pues limita que tengan estas terminales. Entonces, veo que esa barrera, esa condición puede ser, por supuesto, condición fundamental para que las aplicaciones lleguen hasta el participante que vive en esas condiciones. Gracias.
Thank you. And in the last 30 seconds each to Celeste or Tatiana before we're all expelled from the room. Celeste, over to you.
Okay, I'll jump in. I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that it's humans that use the tools. And so if there's one thing that I would have done differently, it would have been even like early on, dedicating even more resources to managing the change management process. So that we could have started to see productive returns to the adaptive management system even earlier than we did.
Thank you. And closing word to Tatiana.
More robust data analysis.
Perfect. With that saving of 20 seconds, let me give a huge thanks to our panel. I know that there's a survey being put onto the screen right now. Please, I'll read the survey for the benefit of our interpreters. But a huge thanks to Fundación Capital, Trickle Up, Village Enterprise, to Ode and Winnie for really getting us off to a great start in the discussion. I would like to encourage everybody to stay tuned on our website for all of the resources on our PEI Twitter shared in this event, and we'll email that to people as well. We have a poll here. I have to read it out for everybody's understanding. So would you use ideas and materials from this session for your future work in this area? A single choice of strongly agree, agree, not agree, or disagree, disagree, strongly agree. Would you recommend a series of webinars to your colleagues? Strongly agree, agree, not agree, or disagree, disagree, or strongly agree. And it looks like that's a nice way to conclude the session. As always, let me thank Claudia and Tim in the background from our team for pulling so many of the resources together and making this quite effortless, as well as our interpreters and Renata and Yelena for their work in bringing the series together, as always. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon or morning wherever you are.
Thank you too, and bye-bye, everybody.